All right, folks, I'm going to kick us off here in earnest as we get going. We have a shorter time today. We've scheduled actually for this to be a half an hour. And what we're planning to do is have this be a series that we'll be doing weekly for the time being for several weeks, and then reassess and see if it's helpful for folks. Just to provide some context here, as you're seeing in the chat window already, everybody's acknowledging this is an incredibly stressful time for parents, for kids, for teachers, for everyone. And I'm describing it these days as sort of mass dysregulation, if you will, which is, of course, not uncommon during traumatic times. And I think we're just beginning to feel the, all the vibrations of those traumatic times throughout so many people's lives, touched in very different ways. One, I think, important way to think about this is that right now we are being faced with a demand for far greater flexibility and frustration tolerance and problem-solving skills than really perhaps for many of us ever before. So those skills are in high demand now: problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this Facebook Live series is that people are urging us to come to the table, because I think we do have a lot to offer in a time like this, where, as many of you all know, what we do here at Think Kids at Mass General Hospital is specialize in helping people manage conflict and problematic situations with one another, particularly situations where somebody's struggling to bring the problem-solving skills, the flexibility, the frustration tolerance to the table to be able to work things out successfully. And our work used to really apply to folks who struggled with their behavior because they lacked skills in those realms. Well, suddenly, unfortunately, I think this work applies to everyone, because we are all having a hard time meeting these demands. Many, many years ago, I used to talk about how oppositional behavior was just a mismatch between the demands of the environment and the skills somebody could bring to the table. Well, you might have excellent skills when it comes to problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance, but right now the demands are way up here. So even if your skills are pretty decent, there's likely a gap between what the world is throwing at you and the skills we're all trying to bring to the table in this moment. So, our hope is that we can be helpful here. And the idea is for us to take one topic at a time, but all revolving around how do we help people manage these situations, handle challenging behavior without resorting to power and control that just makes things worse in traumatic moments like this, where everybody is so dysregulated. And I don't know about you, but if you've been following the news, one of the things that really saddens me is to see the escalating rates of domestic violence and abuse in our homes. And I think it's just beginning. So we want to do our part to try to help families, kids, partners to be able to manage things the best way we all can. So let's approach this entire conversation for the next 25 minutes through the lens that we do here at Think Kids, which is starting from the perspective that we are all trying to manage this situation in the best way we can. Given what the world is throwing at us and the skills we're able to bring to bear in the moment, we're all doing the best we can. People do well if they can. Unfortunately for us all, in moments where we need our skills the most, oftentimes they're the hardest to find because dysregulation gets in the way. When we are stressed, under chronic stress, we have a hard time accessing our skills. So the topic for today is, in essence, when our kids, whether you're approaching this from a parent's perspective or a teacher's perspective, aren't engaging in the online learning that we have set up for them to engage in. And we'd like to take questions from you all and do our best to answer them. I'll frame the discussion just a tiny bit more by saying that I wish there were one-size-fits-all solutions to the problem of kids not engaging. But it really gets down to being a good detective and gathering information to understand the nature of the problem, because there are going to be different solutions to different concerns. And I certainly have examples that I can share from my work just since in this last week around this area, but I'd love to begin to take some questions from you all. So with that as background, let me welcome folks who've come in the meantime here from right here close in Massachusetts, but beyond as well. Really glad people are able to come together here. And Jacqueline, I'll just note your comment here. Time management is a particularly salient lagging skill. Well, it's particularly a salient skill, a skill that's crucially important right now. And if that's a skill, a planning and organizational skill that somebody struggles with under the stress that we're under right now, that's going to be even harder to manage. And for our kids, all of a sudden, a lot of their learning is self-directed, self-guided learning. And I just want to encourage everybody to think of all the skills one needs to bring to bear to be able to do that kind of learning in a self-directed way. I mean, while I wait for folks to type in some questions here, I'll reflect upon, I work with students who really struggle to be able to manage their behavior, to be able to harness their attention and their focus, et cetera. Sometimes you will have aides in the classroom or shared aides in the classroom. And I often describe the role of those folks as being what I call a surrogate frontal lobe to the child, sort of lending your frontal lobe to the kid to sort of keep them organized, keep them focused, keep them on track. Thankfully, in the average classroom before these days, there's a lot of surrogate frontal lobes around a kid who are helping a kid to stay focused, stay organized, follow the sequence and the plan. And it still can be tough for kids. But now our kids are sort of thrown in the deep end and having to navigate this largely independently. And then comes the challenge: how do teachers help on an individualized basis? How do parents do this when, as parents, it's just not something we're trained to do? It's not something we're used to doing. All right, so getting a question here about someone's challenge revolving around their child wanting to spend all of their time on screens, but when they do, they become much more dysregulated. And I'd be interested to know a little bit there. Are they getting dysregulated while on the screen, or are they getting dysregulated ultimately when asked to turn it off or take a break? Because I think that's an important difference here. And while I wait for a little clarification there, okay, thank you for the clarification. When you're asking for non-screen time. Yeah, one of the problems with screens, and of course now, there's a ton of sanctioned use of screens. We need kids to be using screens to be engaging in learning. But one of the challenges is for a lot of kids with attention and working memory and self-regulation issues, there's nothing like things on a screen to sort of suck in their attention, some things that they're intrinsically interested in. And it's really extraordinarily hard for those kids to shift off of those things once they are locked in. And it's likely that's where you're seeing the dysregulation. Now, I think what's so important here is that the problem solving around that has to occur proactively. There is just little hope of problem solving in the moment when a kid's brain and focus is sucked into the screen. So, in my experience, the most successful conversations when it comes to trying to help a kid manage getting off a screen are actually enlisting solutions from a kid, because they're really the only ones that can describe why it is so hard. So I'd start with empathy, bring this up proactively, out of the moment, not when you're trying to get them off the screen. Use a lot of empathy for how hard it is to do it, but then a lot of curiosity. Just like, why is it so hard? What is it about it so hard? And don't be deterred if you get, I don't know. All right, well, you don't know. Let's think it through together here. Is it actually what you're doing? Is it the point at which you're doing it? Is it the fact that you don't want to do what's going to go on next? Like, I really want to understand more about it. And it's a great example of what I said before, that you're not going to have a good solution or set of solutions until we can drill down and understand the specifics for that particular kid, for that particular student. And you might be needing to make some proactive plans about the types of things that are sort of reasonable to expect a kid to do on a screen and be able to get off at a certain time. But you really need them to be partners in this ahead of time if you're going to have any success navigating that. Okay, I have another question. A very social tween says she doesn't want to do anything, go outside, learn anything. In normal times, she's very motivated by time with friends. Yeah, and without knowing a lot of detail there, it would not be unreasonable to say that that's a tween expressing some, displaying some symptoms of some signs of depression. Because the reality is that when we're feeling down and depressed, we're not particularly motivated to do things, even things that we really enjoy when we're feeling better. Now, I would give similar advice first to drill down and try to learn more about why they don't want to do anything, why they don't want to learn anything. And sometimes it seems like, oh, well, that's obvious because they're so upset about what's going on. I always tell people, don't guess, don't make assumptions. We never know. So stop and really try to gather more information about what it is that has them feeling so unmotivated. And, then I think one of the things you'll want to bring up is that when we're not feeling motivated, we shy away from things that often help us feel better. So that you wonder if there's any way to test the waters of some things that might help you feel better, even if right now it doesn't feel like anything that you want to do at this point. And you can notice a lot of my language here, sort of gentle language, trying to ease someone along and make sure that I'm not trying to impose it upon them. I've got a first grader who doesn't want to do online schoolwork. I'm struggling with the balance. How much do I try to get him to do it, and how much do I push? Kelly, it's a crucial question. I have to say I fall out more on the camp of, we parents are not prepared really to be homeschooling our kids. And in this time, it's more important for us to maintain a good, healthy relational connection with our children than it is in first grade to make sure that they're doing the distance learning content. Now, that doesn't mean that I, in the language we use at Think Kids, would use plan C and decide, you know what, I'm just going to drop the expectation entirely. But I would be sure not to get into battles with your first grader over it. Again, I'd try to approach it proactively and try to find out, what it is about the online work that is so off-putting to them, and see if you can get some information that there might be some things you could do about. All right, 17-year-old. We're going from first grade to 17 here, 17-year-old. As long as it's an opportunity to learn and not required, then it's an opportunity I choose not to pick. I did school because it was required, not because it was enjoyable. Who chooses a root canal? Whoever this kid is, I like them. Gosh, I got to tell you, when I was reading my daughter, who's in middle school, when I was reading the updates about that they were sending out, and I was thinking to myself, my goodness, with some of the kids I work with, who are very literal, concrete thinkers, the second you start saying this is optional, it's not required, a lot of those kids are sort of peace out there. I think the first thing you do there is you empathize. And one of the things I like about working with concrete thinkers is they've always got a clear rationale. And this rationale makes sense. And I would remind folks here, and Tina, that to empathize with the 17-year-old doesn't mean you have to agree. But I can empathize by saying, you know what, that makes total sense. It sounds like you wouldn't actually even be in school if it wasn't required. So when they're giving you optional work, why the heck would you do it? I mean, it makes no sense at all why you should be doing it. I get it. Okay. And then what I think is really hard here is you've got to think about, Tina, what are your concerns? What are you worried about? Does it just bother you, which I would understand as a parent myself, that they don't want to do something that isn't required? Are you worried that they are going to get set back in the curriculum when things take off in the future, hopefully? What is it specifically that you're worried about? Because that's what you're going to want to put on the table. Just be very clear that with a 17-year-old who is saying this isn't required, there's no way we can try to enforce making them do it. So, we can try to help them see a different perspective, but we've got to make sure that we're being clear about their perspective as well, which is sort of their choice, ultimately, how to go about it. All right, let me read on a little bit here, folks. I truly have no desk for a 12-year-old. Best laid plan to set up a home desk this summer. Carrie, trying not to throw away the last 6 weeks of the school year. How do we set up a workspace for longer days? than 30 to 45 minutes if homework's required. Yeah, this is actually a big topic. I'm discussing this with a lot of the families I work with. And the right workspace is really important. And it's interesting. It's another advertisement for why you need to engage kids. I work with a family where they had a different problem. They actually ordered an inexpensive desk online, got it delivered, had space in their apartment to be able to set up a nice quiet work zone for their kid. And their kid wouldn't settle down to do the online work at all. And it was fascinating because when they took the advice of having a proactive conversation first, they were drilling down and asking, okay, well, so what is it? We set up this desk, you got your little office, like, why is it not happening? And this kid said, I can't stand the silence. It's deafening. Like, I just can't even focus. And I focus much better when there's stuff going on around me. So like, if I could just work out there next to the kitchen or in the living room where there's a little more action, I'd be able to do it. And of course, the parents' concern there was, well, wait, aren't you going to get distracted by the other stuff? And by the way, we're doing work out there in this work from home environment, so we can't be distracted by you. And he was like, I got my headphones in. I'm not doing much talking at all. And I just like a little extra stimulation. So they actually moved the desk out into a more common space, and that's been working very well for them. And to me, it was just a reminder of, you really got to make sure you understand each person's unique perspective about what's going to be useful. So I'd have a very transparent conversation, Carrie, with your 12-year-old, and just sort of acknowledge the need to try to develop some kind of workspace and make it not your problem, but a family problem of what can this look like in any, one of different ways you could go to try to make some makeshift workspace. And it's going to work differently for different kids. All right. Davina's talking about a parent she knows who is dealing with a huge Plan A issue. Plan A code for, it's when we parents, or anyone else for that matter, are deciding to impose our will and try to make a kid do what we want in the way we want. But her 14-year-old does homework, but he refuses to take seriously the need for physical distancing. Thinks kids don't get this very much. So this, hold on, I've got to click to see a little bit more here. Doesn't want to hear the reasons why. Look, a summary here, I would just remind folks is, when you have these circumstances where you're wanting your kid to listen to you, and that's basically when I boil this down, like, they won't listen, you want them to listen. I would just remind everybody that the best way we have of trying to get somebody to listen is by listening to them first. And it's why when we teach problem solving in this approach, we always start by listening to the other person first, because that's very regulating. And when you regulate somebody, you're putting them in a position where they're much more likely to hear another point of view or perspective. So, again, I would remind people that you don't have to agree to empathize. So a kid who says, oh, kids don't get this very much, and if they do, they don't get sick, so it's not a big deal. You can empathize. And the way you empathize with that is, I get it. So what you're saying is you don't really see the big concern with you here. So it doesn't really make that much sense that you should worry about keeping a distance. So this whole thing seems sort of overblown, and you're sort of tired of that advice. Am I hearing you right? Okay. I'm not agreeing. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to hear them. And if they feel heard, they're more likely to be receptive to you saying something, well, I hear you. And just hear me out for a sec, okay? Because I just a few things that I want to share. And I'm not saying they're right, you're wrong. Maybe it's all right. I just don't know. But I hear you, and I'm wondering if I could share a couple of things, including, you might say, well, it is true that kids, quote, aren't getting this as often. But there are some cases where kids are getting it severely. But also, it can be spread to older folks who are very at risk. Now, what if a kid says to you, I don't care about that, freaking old folks, right? What if they say that? Well, what you do is you inhibit your own dysregulation around that, and especially if you are an old folk, and in the at-risk category, and what you say is, all right, I get it. So that's not your concern. You don't have to be concerned about that. It sounds like you're concerned about being able to do things with your friends. I'm concerned about the impact on other people around. And I don't think those have to be like this. I think maybe there's some way for you to be able to hang out with friends and things like that, and try to help keep other people safe, even if that's not what you're concerned about so far. Okay? All right, let me read down a little bit here, folks. Young students, social distancing, who see me in our environment, want to come up and touch me. When parents pull them back, they look confused. Yeah, my goodness. Angela, yeah, it's disconcerting, right? Entirely. I mean, I got to tell you, I gave somebody a hug the other day by forgetting. I completely forgot. So this is my son's girlfriend, and we were catching up from afar. It's time to say goodbye, and I gave her a hug. She looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What am I doing?" It just feels so wrong to not be doing these things. So, you know, I think we need to be able to explain it flat out to younger students that that you really like hugs and things like that, and being able to give them a pat on their back and things like that. But right now, there is this thing, this virus, that is really easy for other people to catch. So people are trying not to touch each other so that we don't catch this virus that can make people sick. Now, of course, then you go, you're going to have to go right into listening mode, because it's often our first impulse with little ones to do a ton of reassurance. And while reassurance is important, we need to make sure the reassurance is tailored to what they actually think might go on. So I would just ask a lot of questions about what they think about that, and if they're worried or concerned about anything, and that will put you in a better position to be able to provide effective reassurance. Okay. Linda, oh my goodness. 4 a.m. from Guam again. You get a prize for this. All right. Yeah, wanting to see someone graduate. Well, and look, you know, this is sad to say, but it's the reality. You know, if you're sort of looking to find those executive functioning and self-regulation skills and motivation kick in, I hate to say it, this is not the time where I expect it to kick in. I mean, this is a time of tremendous stress that, as I said at the outset of this conversation, our skills are less accessible and have degraded, honestly. So we're trying to sort of help people tread water. But Tina, put on the table your concern about graduation. So they may not care about a bunch of different things, but they may care about graduation. Yes, Anya, I've been hearing a lot from folks about families where there are co-parents but who are separated or divorced, and how difficult it is to manage the transition for a variety of reasons, which is like, should you even be transitioning from a quarantine perspective? Different scenarios, different expectations, very, very difficult. And to state the obvious, the best way to manage this is if the co-parents can get on the same page with some common sets of expectations and understandings. But I realize, particularly in situations where there's conflict between the parents, that this can be very hard to do. I do think you can use what we call Plan B, collaborative problem solving, between parents, to be able to say, hey, look, you know what? I know that each of us needs to have our own sets of rules and routines and expectations and runs our household differently. I'm a little concerned right now about our son, our daughter, you name it, getting stuck in between. And I'm wondering if we can put our heads together about how to work most effectively. The other thing you can do is you can, of course, via Zoom or whatever, include the child in those conversations as well. All right, I'm sorry if I'm missing any along the way. I'm doing my best to keep up with things here. A different kind of question from Gail. But in the last session, I mentioned that we'd be adapting our intensive trainings to an online environment. Yes, Gail, we are working overtime to be able to do that. I can tell you that we are going to be offering in a few weeks a Tier 2 training. For those who are unfamiliar with our training structure, we have introductory trainings, which you can access online right now, shorter ones for free, right through our website, hour and 15 minutes, whole day ones for a fee that we've reduced right now. to make access possible for more folks. But we have these intensive 2.5-day trainings. We used to be offering them all over the place and in Boston live. We're going to be offering Tier 2 training in a few weeks. It's going to be delivered 2 afternoons a week for 2 consecutive weeks. So 4 afternoon chunks over the course of 2 weeks. And we are busily getting our Tier 1 training together as well so that can be offered virtually for the short term as well. So we're doing all we can to try to bring all of this online. Gail, let me know if that answers your question sufficiently there. And in the meantime, helping parents of students not feeling like they have to drill their child with schoolwork and they don't have to mirror the school day. Yeah, Annalise, that sort of echoes my thoughts that I said before. I think our expectations have to be lower for a variety of reasons. Not to mention, even if a teacher was in the home working with the student, if you had to be doing this electronically, you can't do the same amount of work that you were doing before. Everything I'm hearing at this point is telling me that 4 hours for high school students is the maximum that we should be expecting online. It's exhausting, by the way. I can tell you from doing a lot of video conferencing, I'm sure others can too. There's much more output of energy. It's much harder to focus. It's really tiring. And so, we've got to reduce our expectations for sure. And you bring up a good point. We've got to help regulate as educators and practitioners. We have to help regulate parents. I know, when I read the detailed descriptions of what I'm supposed to be helping my kids to make sure they're attending to, who are in 3 different schools, because they're 3 different ages, they're all a little bit different. It's overwhelming. And so as a parent, you're already stressed as well. And that's what I said at the outset. This is just a moment of mass dysregulation for all involved. We're cooped up in small quarters, stepping on each other's toes, all trying to do these foreign things to us while trying to keep our livelihoods intact, protect health, worried about loved ones. It's overwhelming. And so, as important as it is to pursue academic expectations, those need to take a back seat to making sure our relationships are intact right now. All right, a couple quick ones here. Angela, screen time all day and all night for a 5-year-old, won't do schoolwork, won't even play. What would a good conversation look like? Well, pick the time when they're not on the screen, which is probably when they're going to bed and you're trying to lie down next to them at that age, and just say to them, just make an observation that they've been on the screen all day and all night. And you think you understand why, but you want to talk to them a little bit and learn how they're feeling about things. So first, listen, then express why you're worried about this. And, one of the things I tell people is, this plan B, this collaborative problem solving, it's not plan C. It's not like anything goes. So you can say with your parental authority, we've got to do something about this. So we need to come up with a plan. It's got to work for you too, but we've got to do something about this, because the plan can't be that you're on your screen all day and all night. It can't. We've got to do something different. We got to do it together in a way that works for you, but we've got to do it. Yeah, Rosa, I would be afraid people are going to get behind. A little bit of reassurance, everybody's going to get behind, and people are going to have to pick up from behind and move forward. So I wouldn't just, don't bail. You've got to try the best to help them to be able to do this. But as a nurse working full-time in this environment with these 3 kids, there are limits to what you're going to be able to do. So, I think you've got to prioritize first and foremost the sort of the primacy of your relationships with your kids, and making sure that they feel safe and loved first and foremost. Academics are going to be on the back burner in this kind of a case. But again, you can collaborate, have discussions with them, ask them what they can be trying to do on their own as you try to support them through this. All right. I'm aware that we're right up against 2:30 Eastern time. That is, people have lots of things to head off and do. I would ask you, if you don't mind, before you leave today, we're going to leave this up and running for a little bit here. If you could type in and let us know what you'd like us to cover in the weeks to come. We certainly have no shortage of topics, but if there are some particular topics that you're struggling with in your homes, in your classrooms, your online classrooms, if you could please let us know now, so that we will we'll tally those and see what people would find most helpful and gear future sessions to those. And while we're at it, if you have any feedback about how we can make these sessions more helpful for folks, please do let us know. Okay. So we're going to leave the live feed open here, but close the discussion, this discussion, but we're going to leave the chat open so that people can give us some feedback and some suggestions for the coming weeks. For now, I want to close sort of where I started, which is remember, people do well if they can. Our kids, ourselves, our colleagues, our partners, we're all doing the best under extraordinary circumstances to try to bring all our skills to bear here. So have empathy, have patience, give people leeway. The same is true for yourselves. Hang in there. Hope this is helpful. Let us know, and I'll look forward to seeing hopefully many of you all, and bring some other friends with you next week as well. Okay, take care, folks. Be safe.